Hello and welcome back to another SuperCoach video with me, JD. Doing a little bit of a different one today. We're going to try and solve all of the problems there are with SuperCoach. No, not all of them, but it's become pretty apparent in the last couple of months of the year. There's not a whole bunch to do, and I think we can probably improve the game to make it a little bit more fun and engaging over the back half of the year. And so the purpose of this video will be to go through that. I know there's a lot of people hurting right now with a Dacos injury and 0 trades remaining, and I want to remove some of these situations. I just think there's opportunities to tweak the game and have a little bit more fun. I know a lot of people don't think this is a problem whatsoever, and that's totally fine. It's okay to have differences of opinion around these, but if you do have ideas different to mine, please suggest them below. Otherwise, if you just like any of mine, let me know. Let me know which ideas you think will work, which ones won't, and hopefully they make some changes, because I think it is a real miss at the moment how in the back half of the year there's not a whole lot to do. Yeah, all right, let's get stuck in. So as I've already mentioned, I think the big problem here is that the last couple of months of the year just aren't that fun or engaging. We get to this point every year where we're just ghost ships. We're lifting and coasting through to the end of the year, and you're hoping that you've got exactly enough injury trades to get your team over the line. You don't want any to, be spare. Otherwise, those are trades you could have used to convert into points. And alternatively, if you use them too aggressively, you go too hard and you end up with none. You get injuries like we've seen this week or in the last few weeks, and you end up having donuts and a pretty uninspiring and unfun end to the year. And so what's really made this come about is what we've seen in the last couple of years, the adjustment in strategy to SuperCoach, and that really is around trading very aggressively to finish your side and finishing it as early as you can. Now, the more aggressive you trade, the less value you're taking on each individual trade. So maybe the 150k mark doesn't matter as much anymore, but you're getting the extra primo on field earlier than other teams. That means you're banking more points, which snowballs through to the end of the year. And so you may not end up with the absolute best of the best team that you see some end up with, but you've banked so many points, it doesn't really matter. You last the end of the year. And the upshot of this is that you're always trying to find the balance between getting your team upgraded as early as possible and then having exactly enough injury trades to cover all your injuries through to the end of the year. And you don't want any spare. And this is, of course, really hard to guess. But I think this is where the strategies come around. It's no longer holds as gold, which is a mantra I used to play by. A lot of people used to play by. It just isn't going to win you the overall each year. And I think there are some problems with this because you're reliant on luck somewhat to avoid injuries. And it's not, entirely true. There is skill to, figuring out who is more and less injury prone than others. But it's not a very fun way to play the game. Like, I'm not having fun, and I've been fortunate with injuries. I can see why it'd be really demotivating and uninteresting for others. Yeah. All right, so in my solutions, I've got 3 ideas that I'm going to throw up here, and I've tried to put these parameters around them. So 1, I want to keep it a limited trade format. We've already got fantasy, which is a great format, and a standalone format. We want to keep some identity around SuperCoach. And as much as I'd like to see a SuperCoach format with, full trades, that would be interesting. It's not what we're going to try and do with the main game platform. If I'm Herald Sun, we want to try and keep the unique identity of having it limited trades. So that is going to be parameter 1. It can't end up looking like fantasy. It has to be its own unique game. And look, there's more things that make them different than just trades. There's the pricing and the mechanisms around that, the utility spot. There's lots of things, but this is obviously a big one. So we've got to keep it limited trade format still. Secondly is I want to try and introduce more decision points. This is one of the things that I do think the unlimited trade format of fantasy enables that SuperCoach doesn't as much, and that is the best coaches seem to rise to the top over and over again in that format more often, and that's because you have more decisions each week to make, which leads to better coaches ending up on top. Because injuries aren't as big of a factor, or suspensions aren't as big of a factor in that format, you can trade your way out of them throughout the year. And I think that is one of the things that goes wrong in SuperCoach at the moment. You can just get unlucky and have a really bad year. So I want to try and introduce more decision points, which allows those best coaches to get to the top, even if they've had an unlucky year. And then the last point, and where this really came about, was I want to make sure that these last 2 months of the season are engaging. And maybe it's not, properly 2 months. Maybe it's more like 5 or 6 weeks than 8. But I think you kind of get what I'm going for here. I don't want to get to the point we're currently at, where you upgrade your team, you've got 1 or 2 trades left, and then you're just waiting for the year to end. It's just not great. So those are my parameters, my 3 ideas. Let's jump into them. And as I said, let me know which of these ideas you like or don't like. And then if you've got any separate ones, hit me up below. All right, so the first one is something I threw up on the FantasyTakeTV podcast a little while ago, which I don't think Jaws and Enno gave much love, but that's all right. I'm going to throw it back out again. So this one's gated trades. So you still ultimately end up having the same 36 trades that we have at the moment, but you start the year with just 9 trades, and then 9 more trades are released or added as each of those DPP changes occur. So that's in round 6, 12, and 18. With this format, any unused trades would carry forward. So if you only used 8 through the first 6 weeks, then you would have your 1 remaining, plus you'd get 9 more, you'd be up to 10. And I think the nice thing about this is it still becomes a limited trade format. You only have 36 for a year. We're not increasing or adding any more, so it retains that essence of SuperCoach. And not only that, but part of the skill that people argue with the current format is you've got to strike that balance. It's a skill in itself, and you've got to then, have those injury trades and do that efficiently. This lets that happen, but rather than doing it once, you actually do it 4 times throughout the year, right? Because you've got to continue to portion and, adjust how you're trading based on your side at 4 different points in the year. You've got to plan into the future, and this will introduce more decision points, I think, because you've got to do it, 4 times a year, and you've got things as well, like you're not just trying to get rookies off the field as quickly as possible, because that's no longer feasible. You don't have your full 36 trades to try and do that as quickly as you can in the first 12, 11 rounds. Instead, you've only got 18 trades over those, it'd end up being 27 trades over those first 12 rounds. So you're a little bit more limited in what you can do in terms of upgrading. You've got to plan and have these guys last a little bit longer than you would otherwise do in the current format, which I think is pretty nice for a couple of reasons. Not only does it retain the essence and those decision points, but I also think it disrupts the current meta pretty heavily, because you can't just upgrade until your side's complete. And that is very fantasy-esque, the way that we're currently playing it. So while people don't want to go down that format, the strategy is still fantasy. We're just doing it with limited trades. And I think this disrupts that current meta, which is something that's quite interesting for me. And then, of course, it meets that goal of making the back end of the year interesting, because from round 18, you get 9 trades. So you still got lots of stuff to do, for at least 4 or 5 weeks. Which really does take you out basically to the end of the year. This is idea 1, gated trades. Idea 2 has been a little bit more controversial when floated so far, and this is free injury trades. So look, let's face it, having to hope you don't get injuries or suspensions at the end of the year absolutely sucks. And there is definitely skill, as I mentioned, in picking less injury prone players, same with less suspension prone players. But as we've seen throughout this year and other years, you can just get unlucky. Examples of this are Dacos, Took Miller, Clayton Oliver, who were all very durable, but copped injuries that means that you have to trade them. And not to mention, we saw a real large uptick in suspensions with, Day, Sicily, etc. That was just unfortunate and kind of unplanned for. So people that remember the good old days of SuperCoach, where trades were very limited, get a small win here. We've reduced the starting trades in half, from 36 to 18. But this is made up then by the free trades we get for injury and suspended players who will no longer count against that cap. And I've got an example here of Melican, who is injured, Constable, who's not injured. So if I wanted to trade these, I could trade Melican and it wouldn't count against my 18. But if I wanted to trade Constable, it would. And one thing to note here is that how would you determine injured or suspended players? I think it would just be based on the designations that SuperCoach currently uses. So you can see within the app, Melican, he's got the red and white line. So he would be okay to trade for free. Constable, no go. So yeah, it'd be designated by them. Laid outs and those who are managed, that aren't injury related or, are just omitted from the side, obviously wouldn't count. And this would just be plain bad luck. An example of this would be LDU, who was a late out for an injury, but you still wouldn't be able to trade them for free because the expectation that SuperCoach could update that, 10 minutes beforehand, it's just unrealistic. So those things would still be bad luck and wouldn't be covered. But for the bigger injuries that you get throughout the year, those would no longer count towards your cap. So for those that copped to Mills 4, for example, before he got injured, they are no longer as badly punished for, what they got this year. It's still a really bad outcome, don't get me wrong. You'd rather not have your players injured or suspended and, looking at you, Sicily, but you do get some small respite in this. One other thing to note is you still only get 2 trades a week. So while it may not count towards your cap, it would inhibit upgrade plans. Plus, of course, you get whatever that injury affected score is. So it's still a big negative, and there's still skill in picking players that are less likely to get injured or suspended, but it's not as season ending or ruining nearly as much as what we see now. And of course, during the back end of the year when we've got Walsh, Dacos, etc., you can still trade these guys around. So does it meet the criteria? I think yes, it's still a limited trade format unless you manage to have 2 injuries or suspended players every week, which, that you could technically make it unlimited, but I can't imagine a team that has that many injuries and suspensions is going to be traveling particularly well. And you still have to try and plan long-term to get the best team, managing whether I use a capped trade, one of my 18 trades, or an injury trade in a given week. Stuff like that is still interesting decision-making. And then does it keep it engaging? I think it does, because over the last couple of months of the year, even though you may have a finished team and you may have finished it early and traded aggressively with your 18 to get that done, it doesn't mean that some of these injuries are season ending. So the format is still somewhat engaging over the back end of the year. And idea 3 is just to have separate league and overall teams. One of the issues at the moment is you kind of have to pick between, do I want to play for league or play for overall? And look, you can do a bit of both, and I definitely am in a bunch of leagues. We're going to win a bunch on total points, and I think I'm going all right in some of my competitive friend leagues. But the reality is, when you get to league finals, you want to have spare trades so you can adjust your primos based on matchups, based on your opponent. And that introduces a whole different type of skill to what you have in overall, which is just trying to maximize points and bank those points. It doesn't matter whether I do them in round 1 or 23. But if we're allowed to have a team doing each, an overall team and then a separate league team, it would mean that once we get to that point in the year where your overall team has to lift and coast, is what we've been doing for the last few weeks, you can focus on, well, how do I finish my league side? How do I get ready for finals? All that type of jazz. And look, there's still a lot of overlap between who are the best players, making sure you bank enough cash, all that type of stuff. But it does mean that you get that interest in the back half of the year. And I think the nice thing about this one is that it can be combined with either of the other 2 ideas. There's no reason why you couldn't combine 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 and have all of that work and be really interesting. So those are my 3 ideas. Once again, let me know which ones you like, and if you've got any other ideas below. I did toy with putting another one in here, which was getting bonus points for saved trades. So for example, if I finish my team, but I have 10 trades left, and maybe each of those trades gets me 10 points each a week, I'd get 100 points extra a week just for having saved trades rather than using them aggressively or unnecessarily. But to be honest, I decided against it because even though I think it's interesting, part of the fun of the game is trading. And so doing stuff like that which incentivizes you not to trade, I didn't think was a particularly great idea. So there were other ideas that didn't make the list, but I'm keen to see what you think and whether you've got any additional ideas, or maybe you don't even think it's a problem at all, and that is totally okay too. But thanks for listening and engaging with this, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.